Friends, I welcome all the participants here from India, from abroad, from all the branches across the country, from all the metro cities who are sitting at home, at offices during this lockdown period. The way COVID and this corona has gripped all of us, it is the best way to enhance our knowledge. It is the best way to enhance our skills. It is the best time to enhance our health and take care of our health. So definitely I can say, as told by Modi ji and several leaders, we need to transform the challenges into opportunities. And for that, definitely again we are having today the program, the third day of navigation, the path of professional success. And today the session will be role of effective communication in the professional growth. Friends, the role of communication, very important. I can say whether you are into industry, whether you are into practice, without communication, nothing can be done. And what is the importance of communication? I can say you are into practice. You are going to CIT appeal. You are appealing the case of your client before him. You know a lot of things about the law. You know a lot of case laws which have been precedent. You know a lot of things about your client. But if you cannot communicate him well, if he doesn't understand your thing, definitely he is going to pass an order which can be adverse to you. So if the communication is not effective, if the communication is not received, if the communication is not audible, if the communication is not taken, and if the communication is not implemented, then definitely I can say it is of no use. Many persons here are also from industry. The ones who are from industry, you communicate with your bosses. You communicate down the line with your subordinates. You communicate parallelly with all your colleagues. But till the communication is complete, till the communication is clear, you cannot give your full performance. So that is the effectiveness of communication. And today we are masters of this effectiveness of communication, along with Amit Arora, who is known to everyone across the country, who is a dear chartered accountant, a person who needs no words. We hear him in Doordarshan, we hear him whenever Prime Minister have some mega program across the country, whenever some foreign delegates like US President or any other do drop into India, definitely every time we hear Amit Arora. So we welcome you here, Mr. Amit Arora. You are one, I can say from the core of our heart, we will be thankful to you the way you have been associated with ICAI, the way you repay back to ICAI, the way you always have a sense of feeling that you are a chartered accountant and you want to do something for the fraternity. My salute to you, the way you have performed in past, the way you have given your valuable time in GMCS and other things. So it is a great privilege to have you here. We welcome you here, sir. Mr. Navdeep Arora. Definitely I will request Hansraj Chugji to introduce him, but prior to that, a person who is known throughout, a person who is former senior partner of McKinsey USA, and he is an MBA from Harvard University. Definitely a person who is from Harvard. If we talk of communication, if we talk about the skills of communication, if we talk about the softer skills, if you talk about the way you need to get your things done by effective communication, no one other than a person from Harvard would have been a better choice. So definitely we welcome Mr. Navdeep Arora for being and part of this third day and the final day program organized by the Committee of Members in Industry and Business. So, and of course, Professor Will Harvey. I can say all others have a root from India other than you. So you accepting our request, really, it is a great thing, a great privilege for ICAI, great privilege for the committee, and definitely a person who is in one of the foremost and one of the most reputed University of Exeter in UK. Definitely, it will be a great thing. We are really privileged to have you here as a speaker. And I know that all our younger chartered accountants who have joined, even the seniors who have joined, will take a lot of advantage from all the words of wisdom from your mouth. So it is a great thing. We welcome you. Very warm welcome to you for accepting our request and coming in today's program and for addressing all of us. So I welcome all the three speakers out here, and at the same time, I welcome Vice Chairman of our committee, the person who planned this program, the person who took lead to have this program, my brother, my colleague, my co-chairman Hansraj Chubji. Hand in hand we work in this committee for, I can say, capturing the 65% of the members who are into industry. So hand in hand we work together. I'm also thankful to our president and vice president, though yesterday and day before yesterday both have addressed. So today we have not taken them again because we know that they had a very hectic schedule today due to some different committee meetings which is going on. A research committee meeting is also going on. So they have to be there for some different work. So with this, I welcome all of you here, and I welcome all the participants who have joined during this afternoon after having the food in good and huge numbers. In all the both the days we had seen heavy number of participants, huge number of participants, and a good number of participants. So with this, I request Hansraj Chubji to kindly say a brief introduction of all the three speakers. But prior to that, I will just say in 2-3 lines a small story what is the importance of communication. So I can say one thing. There is a story that on one of the occasion, on one person, the king wanted that 3 lions should be kept hungry for a week, and after full of hunger, they need to be brought to the field, and there they need to be left on a guy who was standing alone, and they will tear him out. That was the way it was to be planned. So for a week, they were not given food. Finally, the day came, the guy was standing, and all the 3 lions, hungry lions were standing. They were tied up. Just at that time, that someone from the guy's team had a sitting with the ringleader of all these 3 lions. And finally, the ringleader went and spoke in the ears of all the 3 lions. He spoke something so that even after opening the chains, the lions were sitting as it is, full of hunger, not even attacking that boy. What did that guy told? That guy told that if you are going to eat that boy, you are hungry, I know. But if you are going to eat that boy, you will have to stand on that podium, speak here, give a speech which everyone can understand, and communicate with all the persons who are standing here. Otherwise, the king is going to kill you. So it was not possible for the lion. So that is the thing. That is the importance of communication. So we now request Hansraj Chubji for a brief introduction of all 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. ये राजेश शर्मा जी, really been it's a proud moment for me to have all my 3 friends, those who are from the best of their ability, they are with us, and to guide our members in toto, whether it is from India, whether it is from the overseas. Our members are spread across the globe, and today we are fortunate, though when the plan was being made with, I discussed with Amit Bhai also. Amit Arora is a very friend of mine. Basically, you see, like the closeness comes with the journey you travel with, and fortunate enough, you feel like you are talking to your younger ones, and he'll be a guide to me. And definitely, when this plan was being made, the first day was being allocated to the members from our industry, the strength from the industry, how they guide our members. Then we took some of the members from the corporates. The second day, our 3 past presidents, They inspired our whole of the fraternity so that it can be given the best to the younger ones also, of the middle age group also, and the senior one also. Then it comes is what the next should be. The next, what is the best need for everyone? It is being thought with. It is a communication which can be of the utmost importance. The growth, if we can find out, we can understand with, it is the communication which plays a very bigger role in the growth of a profession, a professional. So with that kind of understanding, then I discussed with Amit Bhai, and Amit ji has coordinated very well, whether it is our gentleman Navdeep Bhai from USA or the Professor Will from the UK. We can understand with it. It has covered a lot, and it is really been great for me to introduce all the three together. Amit ji, everyone knows, he does not need an introduction here in the fraternity, but even then it is my proud privilege to introduce him. He is a chartered accountant himself. He is from our fraternity itself, qualified in the year 2001. He is positioning ourselves. He has positioned at a very great level as an anchor also with the public service broadcaster Doordarshan and the All India Radio. Financial management specialist with the UN also. He is a adjunct faculty, Indian School of Hospitality. Though with the institute, our institute also, he is a regular at a different program. Whenever institute need him, he is always there. That is the best part of it. Even if he is not available, then his preference always goes with the institute only. I am really very grateful and thankful to him, and I really been today he is with us with another two gentlemen. Navdeep Arora ji, let me introduce him. He is an active advisor and investor in insurance and the financial services. Though definitely all these have a relation with our profession also, but he is not a chartered accountant by profession. He is an MBA from the Harvard University. Previously, he was a senior partner with McKinsey and Company. With 16 years remained with them, and he has published so many good things from related with the insurance sector, related with the financial sectors, related with the technology also. So welcome Navdeep Bhai to this program, which is really been a high program, high-end program as far as this committee is concerned. This committee is serving to the 65% of the fraternity of this chartered accountancy, because 65% of our members, those who are with the industry. But that does not mean we are focused with the industry only. As a total, we have around 3 lakh, more than 3 lakh chartered accountants across the globe, and more than 7 lakh our students also. That is the service we are doing with. The third gentleman to whom, with whom I'll be sharing the profile of the Professor Will Harvey. Will Harvey is a gentleman associate dean of research and the professor of management at University of Exeter University, UK, and he chairs the Board of Libraries Unlimited. The focus, he has made a research, and his research focus is reputation, talent management, leadership, professional service firms, education and affiliates. He is a BA first class, University of Durham, MPhil distinction, and the PhD, University of Cambridge, visiting professor at the Harvard University, UC Berkeley, and IIM Ahmedabad also. So he has not only you can see like not only a foreigner, he has a connect with the India also. He is a part and parcel of our IIM Ahmedabad also. He is a regular faculty there also. That shows he is well equipped, well understanding to the Indian system of the growth of the profession also. The chartered accountant over a period of more than 7 decades has grown from a scratch to this position. Now we are a global profession. This profession of chartered accountancy, any chartered accountants who has been created from Indian Chartered Accountant Institute has a power to lead at a global corporates also. Now it's a global institution, global service providers. So both the ends, whether as a profession into the practice or those who are serving to the globe corporates, they are there from the Indian Chartered Accountancy also. So I welcome all the three speakers of the day, which will be taking the talk of the day together. I'll request first Amit Arora ji, our Chartered Accountant friends and a great speaker of the day, to take it forward. Amit ji.
Thank you very much, CA Rajesh Sharma ji, CA Hansraj Chugh ji, respected Chairman and Vice Chairman of the Committee for Members in Industry and Business. Thank you to the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India for organizing this 3-day webinar series. Thank you for all the kind words that you've used for our introduction. Let me share our slides. It's a great honor to be participating in this 3-day webinar series that is titled Navigating the Path to Professional Success. Our topic today specifically is on the role of effective communication in professional growth. So wherever you are across the globe, a very warm welcome. This year, 2020, the entire world is in the COVID-19 phase, and therefore, let me begin with a prayer. Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya. May everyone be happy. May everyone be free from illness. But for public health to gain momentum, it is very essential we all become aware, and not only aware of social distancing, wearing masks, washing our hands properly, but we bring what is known as behavior change communication. Now, what does that mean? Awareness means for all these years we knew hand washing is important. But when we say, let's transform now to behavior change communication, means we should imbibe these values and demonstrate that. So it's time that for us to become an effective communicator, not only we are aware or informed, but there is a visible behavior change communication. So as we closely look into the role of effective communication in professional growth, let me tell you that this will be an interactive session. The audience across the globe, this is the ICAI link where you're watching this live. Down below, you have this icon which says question. We invite your questions on the topic and just press the submit button. Your questions will go to the desk of Committee for Members in Industry and Business. And as we structure this session, after we have discussion for an hour between Professor Will Harvey, Mr. Navdeep Arora and myself, we will keep 30 minutes for the questions from the audiences. You can tweet as well. My Twitter ID is @AmIGood. And the word navigator in Hindi means Navik. So let us all sail together. So if you do share your feedback on different social media platforms, let's use the hashtag Navik. Navik means navigator. So during this session, I'm going to share A to Z for effective communication. A for any effective communicator will always be audience connect. We have to understand that whenever we communicate, at the fulcrum, at the center, will always be the audience, the recipient. After all, for whom are we communicating? Our target audience. So how do we connect with the audience? You can tell a story, you can do a quiz, a poll question. Whichever way you choose, make sure that you connect with the audience. So you can ask them questions, you can make them aware, but as I told you, the idea is also to do behavior change communication as you find in the letter B. You also see that B for an effective communicator is breadth. Right now when I communicate with you, I have 100% control on my breath. Breath is a beautiful process. We sometimes take it for granted, but breath is a beautiful combination of inhalation and exhalation. You must observe, if somebody walks up the staircase or he does a jog or a run, and then you ask that person to express, will he or she struggle while communicating? Yes. So the idea is, whenever you wish to express yourself on any topic, make sure your breath is in control. If you get worked up and your breath is not in your control, you may be able to speak for some time because there may be a burst of energy, but then there will be a point when you'll go blank. C. Calm. Being calm is a superpower, and it's a skill which requires investment. A lot of people say, how do I become an effective communicator? How do I build my confidence? I lack confidence. Please understand, confidence is directly proportional to clarity. If you are having clarity on the subject that you wish to speak, whether it is direct taxes, indirect taxes, audit, accounts, general knowledge, whatever it may be, if you are clear, you will always use simple language. And also make sure that the competency that you have is communicated creatively. Say, for example, if a teacher wants to explain a bunch of students about the Parliament of India, he could do it in three different manners. One, he can do the traditional chalk and board method and tell that the Parliament of India has got two houses, the upper house, Rajya Sabha, lower house, Lok Sabha, and many people perhaps won't understand much, will just do rote learning, may also get marks. The second thing is, he takes the group of students to the Parliament. The third thing is, he asks the student to create a mock parliament themselves. In my opinion, if after 2016 demonetization, there was one thing that came out very positively for the entire society in India, it was push for the digital payments. While digital payments existed before demonetization as well, but after demonetization, we did away with cash and transition to cashless society. Similarly, if one big positive that will come out of COVID-19, particularly for India, it will be that the surrogate behavior we had for the open distance learning will go away. We will now have what is known as blended learning. The physical learning will happen because teachers need to have the feel of students in both ways. But what we're doing right now is going to be acceptable in the society. How many people I have seen over the last 1 month have very proudly done online certification course and demonstrated that on their LinkedIn profile? So creativity. And D for digital communication. How we are connected now? The digital infrastructure we are setting it up. D also is for decision making. If you intend to become an effective communicator, please ensure that you have the ability to decide. Decision is right or wrong is a separate debate altogether. But courage to take decision is very necessary. E, ethics. Now, many of us may feel, oh, okay, we have studied ethics, we passed that paper. No. Ethics is not a paper to be passed. Ethics has to be demonstrated. Something that is legal may not necessarily be ethical. Ethical is a value set system. And you also need to have control on your emotions. I write ego there to specifically communicate that just a small ego has the capacity to disintegrate a brilliant professional career into dust. So very essential that as you climb the ladder of professional journey, you only become more humble. And E is also for explaining fact plus impact. Gone are those days when a communicator will just tell fact. Today, Google Baba is very capable of doing it. Can we have a facilitator, a communicator, who could also tell me an impact? Say, for example, if I tell you, what is a power play? Make sure you keep your response coming, #Navik. Many will say power play is a rule in the game of cricket. Now, this will not suffice. 9 out of 10 people may know this, but you also need to tell the impact. So if power play is a rule in cricket where, say, does it happen in ODI Does it happen in test cricket? Is power play also in 2020? So if I say within the 30-yard circle, only say 5 fielders will be there, what will be its impact? Impact for the batsman, he'll probably go for quick runs. Impact for the bowler, there is more chance for the wicket. Effective communicator also explains the impact. F, fun. Whatever be the situation of life, fun element. Do some icebreaker, do some humorous exercise, develop the skill of learning humor. In yoga, there is one kriya that people do, the laughter kriya. Imagine if one can have health benefits by artificial laughter. If only we embrace natural smile and laughter, you can imagine the kind of health benefits we will have. And F is also for full stop. Many people, they have a lot of things to share, but they don't structure their sentence. They don't finish their sentence. Sometimes you wonder, where did the sentence begin and will it ever end? So let me put a full stop here, and I will come back with G to Z of effective communication. But meanwhile, let me ask you a poll question. I told you that the A is for audience connect, and one of the ways you can connect with the audience is a poll question. So see, whatever we are trying to tell you, I'm also the narrator in the session, where I will always talk with my audience to tell that whatever is being told theoretically, we are also in this session demonstrating that practically. So the poll question for the audience is across the globe. Take your pick. The topic is navigating the path to professional success. What do you think? The path to professional success is rise, 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 the linear way? Or is it cyclical? Rise, fall, rebuild. You have to mark the choice. Please share it in that question column, submit, or tweet it, #Navik. Is it rise, 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 or rise, fall, rebuild? And as we await the answers from our dear audiences, it is my extreme privilege to be joined by two very distinguished guests. Professor William Harvey from the prestigious University of Exeter, UK, and Mr. Navdeep Arora, former senior partner, McKinsey, USA. And I'd like to go to Professor Will first. Professor Will, welcome. Tell us something more about yourself, please.
Thank you very much, and it's a real privilege to be here, and fascinating discussion around communication. Looking forward to discussing more with your audience. I'm the Associate Dean of Research in the Business School at the University of Exeter, which is one of the top research universities in the UK, what's known as a Russell Group University. I'm also a chair of the board of Libraries Unlimited, which represents over 50 libraries across the UK. I've done a lot of research across a range of organisations, from private to public to charitable organisations, looking at how they manage their reputations. For example, think about how you build a reputation, how you might have to manage it, how in some cases you may have to rebuild or rehabilitate your reputation. I also do a lot of research around talent management and leadership, and a lot of my empirical focus has been looking at professional service firms, which obviously will tap in well to your audience here. As was said in the very generous introduction, I did my first degree at the University of Durham, which is in the northeast of England. It's the third oldest university in the UK after Oxford and Cambridge. I got a first-class degree there. During my studies, I was on exchange at the University of California, Berkeley, and then I went on to do my MPhil and my PhD at the University of Cambridge. After that, I've spent some time working at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, as well as a postdoc at the University of Oxford, and then my first position was at the University of Sydney in Australia. As you can see, I've held multiple visiting positions, including at Harvard University, the Kennedy School of Government, at UC Berkeley, as I mentioned, and I've also been a visitor at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, as well, which was a huge privilege. So it's great to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. Back to you, Amit.
Thank you very much, Professor. Extremely honored to have you with us, and absolutely impressive journey and your profile. Thank you. Let me now go across to Navdeep Arora. Welcome, Navdeep. Do share more about yourself. Navdeep, unmute, please.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much to the chairman and the organisers for giving me the privilege to join this meeting. I'm Navdeep Arora. I am currently an active advisor and investor in insurance and financial services. That's something that I have been doing for the last 4 years. More importantly, I am working on my PhD, and Professor Harvey is actually my supervisor. So, which is what connects me very dearly to Professor Harvey, who's been a massive source of inspiration for me. Previously, I spent 16 years at McKinsey & Company as a senior partner. My sectors of focus were insurance and financial services, particularly the impact of technology. And nowadays, I think all of us talk about fintech and insurtech, and that happens to be my, area of passion when it comes, professionally. And I work with a couple of venture capital firms and a set of startups in the space that I advise during the journey. So that's my background, and it's my privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to sharing, my life journey and some of the ups and downs in my life, relating back to precisely what Amit just talked about. Is our life all about rise, 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 or is it more an iterative and learning process of rise, fall, and rebuild?
Thank you very much, Navdeep. In fact, my first question is to you. As you talked about your journey, it was in the late 80s that you went to the US. But do you remember seeing this photograph on the streets of Delhi in mid-80s? And what does this photograph communicate to you? Rishte, rishte.
Oh, yeah. So, Amit, you might want to translate it for Will. I remember this was a big advert on the walls in India back in the 80s. What it basically means, Will, in English, it means, what's the best way to translate it, Amit?
This is about a matrimony ad, Will, which meant proposals and proposals. Just imagine one single sentence, and it drew massive attention. How do you see, Professor Will, just one sentence, proposals and beautiful communication strategy?
I think it's very clever, and you could apply that in many different ways, because it's really looking at the perspective of two individuals, the one person who is proposing and the recipient who is receiving it, which for me goes to the heart of what communication is. I see it in three ways, actually. One is the perspective of communication from me, who is delivering the communication right now. Two is, how is what I'm communicating right now going to be landed by the recipient, the person hearing it? And then I think there's a third, which probably isn't encapsulated in this very useful visual, which is, if someone was looking in at the communication from the outside, not involved directly in the dialogue, how would they interpret or deem the dynamic of that communication?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I come back to the poll question, and we are getting a lot of response from the audience in the Twitter as well. So we've got Girish, who says the answer is rise, fall, rebuild. That is his opinion. C.A. Gautam Datta also says it's all about rise, fall, and rebuild. We have response from Kailash, Samir Shah, Arjun Pawar. Thank you everyone for responding. So, Professor Will Hardway, What's your take? The path to professional success, is it linear or cyclical?
I would definitely say it's cyclical. And I also think, and I remember, funny enough, this time last year, I was asked to go back to my old school to give the guest of honour address to young secondary school pupils. And the theme of my discussion in that talk was about learning from failure and setback. And which seemed quite counterintuitive, because in the UK, when you have a speech day, it's a day of happiness and celebration. And I said, look, I don't want to put a dampener on the positive theme of the day, but I actually strongly believe that we learn more through setbacks than we do necessarily through success, because it enforces us to sort of reflect on ourselves and our behaviours and how those actions and behaviours have impact on others. And so although we may not like to fall and we may not like to have to rebuild, I think the process through which we do those two things is a really important part of our journey and an important part of how we understand ourselves and how we understand ourselves in the context of our environment, whether that's the physical environment or the people, the animals, and everything that surrounds us. So I believe quite strongly that even though we might not like to go through that kind of circular process, it is a very important part of our learning journey.
Navdeep, your opening remarks on the path to professional success?
3 points. So number one, I fully agree with Professor Harvey that the practical path that all of us actually go through life is cyclical. It's a combination of rising, falling, learning, rebuilding, and then rising again. I think the important thing is, are we on the right trajectory? I think it's the trajectory that matters over time. I think there'll be pebbles in the road throughout the trajectory, but if we are learning from those pebbles and continuing to rise over time, I think that's what that matters. So that's number one. Number two, what I do believe is important is, how do we fall? Do we fall forward or do we fall backwards? I think falling backwards, in my opinion, is when we fall because of mistakes that we could have avoided. And I can cite an example from my own personal life where I believe I actually, after a very, very successful career, I made a mistake, something that amounted to professional misconduct, and I fell backwards. And it took me, I would say, 3 or 4 years to really turn the corners and start looking forwards and start to rebuild my life. So I think the difference there is, if we fall, let's fall forwards. Let's learn, rebuild, and rise. And let's try not to fall backwards. And I think, given Professor Harvey's expertise, I think I'm sure he can enlighten us on, what falling backwards means and how, especially in the current torrid environment of, post-COVID economy, how we can very easily succumb to falling backwards. And what should we do, especially as chartered accountants, as highly educated, highly responsible professionals, who are charged not only with financial management, but with compliance and control. How do we make sure that we are not falling backwards? So that's my synthesis, Amit.
That's a beautiful synthesis that is very illuminating, Navdeep. And I think it is very essential for our audiences to understand now that majority of them are responding that the path to professional success is cyclical, that fall is inevitable. But as Navdeep says, the key question remains, are we falling backwards or are we falling forwards? And therefore, learning from that and rebuilding is very essential. We all make mistakes in our life. I have also experienced a lot of failures. And therefore, if somebody says today, good words for you, it is because you have failed that you eventually tasted success. There is light because there is darkness. And therefore, it may be profound at one level, but it is also a very simple philosophy on which life works. And as Navdeep said, in your journey, there will be pebbles. Do you have it in you to ensure that you take them in your stride and move forward? But while it is very intriguing, water through this pump. So while everyone aspires growth, how do we ensure that the path of reputation is easy for us? How's that ride to rise? Professor William Harvey, please.
Thank you. I think it's really important to think about what we mean by growth, because I think the danger is, of course, that we can think about growth in a very narrow kind of economic way, for example, which may incentivize us to really focus on very narrow sets of measures and metrics, whether that's revenue, whether that's profit, for example. I tend to think about growth in a more holistic way, which links a lot, I think, to the reputation literature. I mean, historically, there's been a very strong emphasis through agency theory on the responsibility of one narrow stakeholder, often an economic stakeholder. And that's created, in my view, kind of a set of perverse behaviors, which is really very much about the kind of economic types of behaviors. But actually, I think when we're thinking about growth, coming back to your question, we need to think much more broadly about what do we mean by growth? Is it our economic stakeholders? What does that mean if we just focus on our economic stakeholders? What does that mean in terms of what we're doing to our community? What the impact is on our environment? If we're going to just relentlessly as a leader focus on growth and work very, very long hours, what does that mean in terms of my relationship with my spouse or my family members or my friends, for instance? So I think in a rather broader sense, we need to think about growth holistically. And if we start to overemphasize very narrow sets of measures, that can be great for understanding those measures, but everything has a cost and an implication for elsewhere. So my question is, if you're just going to focus on growth and measure it in an economic sense, what does that mean in terms of the implications for other stakeholders and other non-economic measures?
Navdeep, as someone who's been a senior partner with McKinsey for 16 years and helped many organizations develop strategy for growth, given we are in the wake of COVID-19, how do you foresee the challenges ahead for the organizations? Do you see more pebbles on the way? Will the reputation be dented? What's your forecast?
I would highlight three things which are really a combination of opportunities and challenges. And then I think Professor Harvey can, perhaps help us reflect on what do we do about those? The three things I would like to highlight in the post-COVID economy that I think will particularly impact the audience on the webinar today. I think number one, there will be short-term pressures on public companies, on private companies, and these short-term pressures will cause retrenchment of budgets. They will cause headcount reductions. They will cause cost pressures. And I I do not want to set the negative tone, but I think it's very important that we put the facts on the table. We know that that is going to happen. So all of those things will put a ton of pressure on professionals, on chartered accountants, on senior leaders, senior executives. Number two, there will be pressures for growth. There will be pressures to drive financial performance very aggressively. Number three, and rightfully so, the government will put in place some new regulations, some new compliance and control mechanisms. And what happens, I think if we look back historically at similar crises, if you look back at the financial crisis of 2008 or other similar issues, every time things of this nature have happened, individual professionals have found themselves under tremendous pressure, under tremendous stress. And how we respond to that stress, how do we ensure that we keep our professional obligations, our, not only the loyalty to our organizations, we all have, we work for different companies, we work for different professions, and we have loyalty to those organizations for financial performance. At the same time, all of us have an occupational obligation as chartered accountants. And so the question becomes, how do we make sure that we do the right things and avoid the temptations to cut corners and fall into traps that lead to professional misconduct and can damage not only our personal reputation, but our professional and organizational reputation. So those are the three things that I think we've got to be very, very careful about in the post-COVID economy. And let me turn it over to Professor Harvey now to connect the dots, between what I just mentioned, reputation overall.
Thank you, Navdeep. I fully agree with those 3 points, and I think this set of slides gives you some insight into a brief article I wrote a few weeks ago in the European Business Review, which is some advice about what might business leaders do right now in the current COVID-19 recovery period to think about managing the reputation of their business. And as Navdeep sort of touched upon, that there is a coupling process between the reputation of us as leaders and as managers and the reputation of the businesses and organizations that we serve. So it's very important to kind of think about those two things working in tandem, the individual reputation, but also the organizational or the corporate reputation, or even the government reputation, if we're talking about the activities of politicians. So just very quickly, if you look at the very top of this diagram, when we're thinking about how you manage the reputation of your business, clearly compassion is a really important aspect right now. People are going through immensely challenging periods professionally and personally. So as a business leader, showing that compassion, and as Amit mentioned earlier, communicating that compassion through empathy, through sympathy, is really important. And then second, in the green, what are you doing as a business to support those people? It's one thing to actually express sympathy and empathy, but are there any particular actions and behaviours that you can reinforce to really show that you're supporting those people? And I wouldn't want to prescribe those particular steps, because that will depend upon your business and the financial circumstances of your business. But there are lots of economic and non-economic means of showing support. The third, which I've been absolutely blown away with in the last few months, is how different businesses are trying to help the cause. So here in the UK, you've got high luxury brands like Barbour, for instance, helping to produce PPE, personal protective equipment, for the National Health Service in the UK. You've got distillery companies producing alcohol gel, for example. You've got Formula One companies trying to create ventilator machines. You know, these are fantastic examples of how organisations are temporarily pivoting into other areas to support the cause. You've got schools producing face masks, for instance. So I think there is a million and one different ways that businesses can do that, which I think sends a very positive communication signal about their kind of positive, ethical kind of alignment with the cause. And then in yellow, I've asked, well, where are the backups? So, of course, unfortunately, every business is going to find, for a variety of reasons, people are not going to be available to support. Now, that may be, unfortunately, because of a health problem, or because they need to support their families, because there's no support or schools open. So from a planning and logistics point of view, this is more than just replacement and succession planning, which would be focusing at the very top tier of organisations, but it's about at every critical level of an organisation, where are the backups? And then next I've put how transparent are you? Now, I think pretty much anyone who's been in a managerial or a leadership role will appreciate that 100% transparency is actually often not appropriate, and in some cases is actually unethical. If you think about sharing data, for instance, or personal conversations, it wouldn't be appropriate to share that type of information. But at the same time, in this COVID-19 era, it's trying to find that right balance between communicating with the right kinds of people. And so the next aspect that I wanted to flag is around what and when are you communicating. And so what I mean here is thinking carefully about, well, what type of information are you communicating, and when might be the appropriate time to do that? So let me just give you one vignette. For instance, at the University of Exeter, within the business school where I work, our senior team have made a very clear step that we're not going to communicate with staff between outside the hours of 8:30 in the morning and 5:30 p.m. At night. Now, that doesn't mean that people can't send emails, but we're sending a very strong signal that actually we don't expect people to be sending emails, responding to emails after 5:30 at night or before 8:30 a.m. in the morning. And that's because we recognise that people are under immense pressures, which links to my second last point around managing work-life boundaries. I think that's a really important aspect of respecting people's time and the immense challenges that people are facing right now, and almost the impossibility of switching off. And the final point I really wanted to make is that inevitably during these difficult times, some of the stakeholders that we are working with in our organisations are not necessarily our primary responsibility right now, because we've got other areas of priority. But I think there are very important ways as businesses we can maintain and sustain those relationships, because whilst they may not be salient right now in the short term, they could play a very important role for our recovery in the long term. So those are just some of the steps I think that could be useful for thinking about maintaining your reputation during this difficult time.
And Professor, do you think that professionals and businesses need to understand in the present 21st century digital world that a defined communication strategy and executing the same is very critical to manage their reputation?
Definitely, yes. And so a couple of things that I would raise there. One is really reflecting on who are your core set of stakeholders. You know, whether that's investors, whether that's your employees, whether it's government, whether it's funders, that, you know, every business and organization will have its own set of stakeholders. So I think the first step is just identifying who they are. And then the second aspect is then thinking about how and when is the most appropriate time to communicate with them. And what you absolutely don't want to do is unduly privilege one or a small number of stakeholders at the cost of others, because while that may serve you well in the short term, as I said before, businesses, or good, healthy businesses, are in for the long term. And so managing those relationships and communicating those relationships in a meaningful way in the long term is really important. And that comes back to the bottom of this diagram around transparency. Being very clear, look, right now we're in a particular circumstance and we need to really prioritize A, B, and C, which means that DEF at the moment we're going to have to kind of curtail for the time being.
Right. Navdeep, a quick thought. Earlier we used to think that it is only the shareholders to whom the professionals or businesses need to communicate, but now it's the entire gamut of stakeholders.
Yes. Absolutely. I think there is, as Professor Harvey mentioned before, there was a school of thought in business which there are two extreme schools of thoughts, right? There's one school of thought that believes that shareholders, people who invest money in the business, should be the only stakeholders. And anything an organization does should be focused on the financial interests of the shareholders only. The other extreme, the other school of thought, says that everybody in the community, everybody, whether it's environmental protection, climate, members of the community, the country as a whole, investors, employees, customers, everybody is a stakeholder, and all of them should be valued equally by a public organization.
Yes, and in fact,
then in the middle is a more balanced view, which is where business is moving now. And the balanced view is there are a set of salient stakeholders, and their salience is determined by their participation in the risks and rewards of the organization. And a company should focus of those salient stakeholders. So that, I think that's, in fact, about 6 months ago, there was a meeting of business leaders in New York led by Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase, where they all actually signed a charter and a mandate for the industry to move away from single shareholder focus to a multiple salient stakeholder focus.
So that is very enlightening that perhaps the communication has to be for a wider set of audiences, and maybe that will also give a push to transparency, and more transparency perhaps is a critical factor for greater reputation, and that is why the rise will happen. But after rise, let's talk about fall. And Professor Will Harvey, as ironical as it may sound, I was reading the article in the UK daily, the Financial Times, which quoted both of you, and you had expressed an outcome of a research, a very interesting research that has been done by University of Exeter, that now that there will be more demands and more pressures, say for example the environmental pressure, this could in fact also increase unethical practices. So could you please tell us that while all of us would want to communicate to build our brand, enhance our reputation, why would a professional or a business lose reputation?
Thank you. A great question. Happy to talk a little bit more about the study as the conversation proceeds. I think it comes back to self-preservation. And as Navdeep mentioned earlier, we're in a situation where businesses are under immense pressure, and already we're seeing lots of businesses that are failing. And when businesses and individuals are in a corner, so to speak, what you tend to see is a much greater propensity for people to be willing to adjust their moral in order to self-preserve. And that may be to protect their business, that may be to protect their identity and their status within a community. And so right now, although there is very little media or research coverage on this, the risk of professional misconduct globally is extremely high. It's only that we haven't seen it yet because the eye of government, of regulators, of business is focusing on a very narrow set of things right now for obvious reasons that we've been discussing. Briefly, let me just tell you about the project because I think it would be helpful for people to understand. Navdeep and I had a unique access to a federal prison in the United States of America, where we were able to interview 70 inmates who all of whom had committed some form of white-collar crime, whether that was for tax fraud, financial fraud, other forms of professional misconduct. And this kind of access to data is extraordinarily difficult to get ethical approval for. And then to be able to speak to these people for very long periods of time, as Navdeep did for his PhD working with me, basically meant that we had this incredible set of explanatory factors that gave us an insight into understanding what caused all these people who were highly educated, very successful career-wise, from government to banking to consulting to accounting to science, you name it. These are extremely successful individuals who have fallen from grace, which seems highly irrational. Why would they do that? And as, coming back to sort of my first point in response to your question, one of the reasons for that is not just about their individual circumstances, it's about the context in which they're operating. And what I'm saying right now is that clearly the context is a high stress environment where people are willing to maybe overlook some ethical and moral stances in order to preserve whether that's their business or their own individual status, which is ironic, of course, because if they get caught, they're more likely to completely destroy their own reputation. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Navdeep.
Yes,
no,
I'm going to go to Navdeep. Navdeep,
yeah, please.
Quick point though, just to draw upon what Professor Will said, that these are stressful times, and perhaps therefore the audiences tuned to the program right now need to understand that leaders do need emotional support. And while over the last few years, a lot of talk in India and worldwide has happened on mental well-being, we still believe that many organizations either lack or they fail to adequately provide that level of mental comfort. So Navdeep, do add your views, plus also guide us on what could perhaps be individual triggers that could lead a professional to a vulnerable situation.
Surely. So let me start with the latter. Let me start with your second question first, which is, what are some of the individual triggers that lead us, or that can lead anyone, to professional misconduct and literally destroy years and years of hard work and impact your families in ways that you do not even want to imagine. And I know there are lots of very, very intelligent, very highly educated young professionals on the webinar. And let me make a personal plea to everyone. You can do 1 million great things in your life. 1 million great things. you make a small, tiny mistake and it all comes crashing down to the ground. It is multiplicative. You can take 1,000,000 and multiply it by negative 0.00001, a very small mistake, and it all turns negative. So please be very careful in your careers as chartered accountants and watch out for these traps that can lead you to professional misconduct. So let me answer, Amit, your question, the triggers. I think there are, in our research, Professor Harvey and I found 6 triggers that lead us to the slippery slope of professional misconduct and fraud. One is perceived burden of custodianship. All of us, when faced with these stresses, put more burden on our shoulders to solve those problems. And when we are overburdened, we tend to isolate ourselves, which makes the problem even worse. Number 2, fear of failure. And when I say fear of failure, I'm not talking about just money. I think some money is greed at times is a factor, but based on our research, in less than 10% of the cases, most of the times it was the fear of losing your status in the society, your respect in the society, your respect as a professional. Number 3, ego and hubris. Ego and hubris that can come from tremendous amounts of success in the past. Amit, as you said, rise, and then you go, oh, there's nothing that can, I'm invincible. And that creates a level of ego and hubris that we all have to be really, really careful about. Number 4, overcompensation for our perceived deficiencies. I think all of us, grow up in different environments, in different situations, and we, and when we end up in certain environmental and organizational context, we see some hero cultures. We are put under pressures. We are under aggressive targets. We all want to push forward on our career. And at times, these type of pressures surface our own psychological deficiencies. And we end up overcompensating for those. And when we overcompensate, we push ourselves to cut corners. And number 5 and 6, lack of information, changing regulations, the changing boundaries, and sometimes we don't know if what we are doing is right or wrong. So I think those are the 5 or 6 triggers that cause us to fall in the trap of professional misconduct. So Amit, that was your leading question, right? Amit, we cannot hear you.
Yes.
Amit, you're mute.
Now that you've shared, thank you. Now that you've shared the individual triggers, I was wanting to request Professor Harvey and Navdeep, both of you, if you could also share some solutions. Because like at the outset I said, A for awareness. But what's more important now is behavior change intervention. What do we do as professionals to bring in a behavior so that, like you said, after 1 million good things, we consciously avoid doing that one small mistake?
Professor Harvey, please.
Thank you, Navdeep. And Amit, if you've got it there, perhaps we could move to the slide with the 3 concentric yellow circles. That would be helpful. Yeah, I think what Navdeep and I found through looking through this very rich data set is that when thinking about the causality of misconduct, we often, when we read newspaper reports or listen to a broadcast, we often fixate on the individual, as if somehow the individual was born to be bad and that they had this kind of innate path-dependent propensity to act unethically. And of course, that's a very simple and a very easy way for anyone to kind of conclude or draw closure around an issue. We want a scapegoat, in other words. But unfortunately, life is not so simple. And what we found from our data is that really to understand what causes misconduct, you need to go beyond the individual. You need to think about three things that we call the apples, the barrels, and the sellers. And so the apples is the individuals, which we've talked about. The barrels is really talking about the organizational environment, the culture. And the sellers is talking about the wider ecological environment that we operate in. And so what we would suggest, which is a very difficult thing to achieve in practice, is that to understand misconduct, those three things are operating in tandem. So you could have a wonderful organizational culture, but if an individual is operating in a wider toxic environment, let's say he's had very poor parenting or his peer set are operating very unethically, then it's pretty obvious that the organizational culture, it may be strong enough to dismiss that person if they're acting unethically, but it's not going to be enough in general to create a positive environment. And so thinking about how as a society, as an organization, and as individuals, we can create that right mix, it is really important. So that would be kind of my overarching kind of comment. Navdeep, do you want to just talk through those behavioral solutions? Because obviously you were closer to the data to think about how this audience could really think specifically about those individual steps, bearing in mind that we need to think about the environment, the organization, and the individual all at once.
Absolutely. Amit, do I have a minute to do that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I think in terms of the solutions, what should we do? So Monday morning, when we all go back to when we resume our jobs in our living rooms or in our kitchens, what do we do differently? So one thing we have found is greater control and compliance. Just more aggressive control and compliance is not the answer. In fact, that leads the unintended consequences of aggressive controls and compliance are much worse unless controls and compliance are complemented and supplemented by behavioral solutions, by how people behave, how people think and make decisions. So I'll quickly talk about 8 behavioral solutions that our research indicated. I think one is, moving from a reactive to a preventative approach. Second one, very, very important one, which is providing social support and anchoring. I think what we have found is that people who commit professional misconduct, they tend to isolate themselves. They make a mistake. To cover that mistake, they make a bigger mistake. To cover that one, they make another bigger mistake, and they end up on a slippery slope. And when they end up on a slippery slope, they isolate themselves. So therefore, looking for those symptoms among our colleagues, reaching out to our family members and providing support, that social anchoring is critically important, especially in today's age when we are running at 50 miles an hour. Number three, personalizing the potential victims. In today's business, we are so far removed from people who are impacted by our actions. Think about senior executives, right? They're not in touch with their customers, right? And if we can personalize the people who might be impacted by our decisions, if we can help visualize what that might be, I think that can be a massive behavioral deterrent to professional misconduct. Number four, a very important one, decoupling standards for ethical and business decisions. So what happens in businesses typically? Every time you're under stress and you have to make a decision, what do? Cost benefit, right? Very binary. On the other hand, ethical decisions are not binary. They're not black and white, right? But what happens to people is when you're under pressure and you have to make an ethical decision, you go back to your comfort zone, which is cost benefit, and you end up making wrong decisions. So decoupling standards for ethical and business decisions. Number five, thinking more laterally than compliance. So compliance, if you think about compliance, and I personally experienced that in many companies, compliance is basically checking the box. And compliance is passing an exam every 6 months to show that you understand the rules. And I've seen people sitting in groups and saying, oh, it's that time of the year. We have to do the exam. And they sit in a group and they cheat and they pass the exam, right? Now the question is, that's not the purpose of compliance. The purpose of compliance is for you to understand how to safeguard your business and your interests. Number six, providing graceful exits. So I have a friend who's a CFO, and I think all of you, being finance professionals, can identify with that very well. So what my friend does is he has a monthly meeting where he brings all his people together, and he basically says, if any one of you has advertently or inadvertently made any mistake, this is your chance to come forward. Everything shall be forgotten. And in fact, I will actually reward you for having the courage to do so. So giving people graceful exits is a wonderful behavioral solution to avoid professional misconduct that can escalate. The next one is fostering judgment over intuition. What we mean by that, in fact, Professor Harvey and I have been talking about that last couple of days, is when we are under pressure, our brain hijacks our ability to make reasoned judgments, and we go back into our comfort zone, which is intuition. And intuition, under situations of stress, typically leads us to wrong decisions. And then last one, values, making sure that we have long-standing, memorable values that our leaders are role modeling on a daily basis. This sounds cliche, but as Professor Harvey will tell you, values are some of the most important pillars of instilling the right behaviors in your organization. So those are the 7 or 8 things that I would suggest in terms of the how, the real how. In addition to, of course, you've got to have the right compliance and controls, but just compliance and controls is not going to do it.
Absolutely brilliant. I think that is very, very enlightening. So we did agree that the path to professional success is rise, where we focused on reputation. Inevitably, there could be fall, but it is up to you how you communicate to yourself and to the external stakeholders and respond to it. And then it's time to rebuild. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is just a quiet commitment to try again. And we salute everyone who shows that courage. Navdeep?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you were talking about communication. I wanted to give, to cite an example of a great communicator that I think all of you have witnessed immensely over the last 2 or 3 months. And I'm referring to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I believe Prime Minister Narendra Modi has done a brilliant and exemplary job of galvanizing the country to come together and fight the COVID crisis. And in doing so, he has been able to connect with every stakeholder, whether it's the political parties, whether it's the opposition, whether it's the corporate leaders, whether it's the white collar workers or the blue collar workers, whether it's the, our defense forces, our medical workers. He has done a brilliant job, and he has role modeled it by showing the country that India is going to not sacrifice humanity for economic benefits. He has found a way to balance it all, and that is precisely what Professor Harvey was alluding to when he talked about focusing on salient stakeholders.
Right. Well, Professor Harvey, one last question from my side, because we had promised our audiences 30 minutes of question and answer, and I will hand it back to the respected chairman, vice chairman in just a bit. One last question. What's been the practical traction your research has been getting, and how do you see resonance of the research outcomes with global businesses and global issues?
Thank you. Yes. Well, since the research project was exposed in the Financial Times by Andrew Hill, who has worked at the Financial Times for several decades now, we've received a lot of different interest in professional misconduct because, of course, unfortunately, it covers all facets of life, from education to government to corporations to charities. And so it's something that we need to manage very carefully. As Navdeep kind of alluded to already, what we've seen in the last few years is a steady trend towards exactly what Navdeep was talking about with Prime Minister Modi in terms of thinking about the much wider group of stakeholders that we serve, whether that's Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum, Larry Fink of BlackRock. There's been Harvard Business Review articles talking about the sort of move towards stakeholder capitalism. The Business Roundtable Group have also signed an agreement. So I think what this particular very difficult period is actually presenting and recognizing is that we need to sort of step back and reflect upon a much wider group of people and how the actions of what might seem like quite a narrow set of group actually can have reverberations for a much broader group. And so to come back to your question, I think our research really has resonance there, because whilst this is a very narrow set of people that we've spoken to, from the data that we've gathered from the prison, what we found is actually, even though this is a small group, it has an implication upon a much, much wider group of people. And indeed, if we were just to turn back the clock by 12 years and look at the global financial crisis, think about how there was quite a narrow set of individuals who had a disproportionate impact on the lives of a much greater number. And I think that's a very important microcosm for what we're experiencing now and for why the stakeholder capitalism agenda is just so important moving forward.
Thank you very much, Will and Navdeep. This has been a very nice, enriching session, understanding how communication impacts the professional journey and the journey of businesses, and how we need to balance the competing needs of stakeholders. And you offered a certain sense of practical solutions in terms of what can organizations do. So I think the clear answer to the poll question, what's the path to professional success? Almost everyone agrees it's not linear. It is cyclical, rise, fall, and rebuild. We need to acknowledge and accept, and that will ensure that we are able to be on the path of journey. Just like the Trinity of gods, Brahma the creator, Vishnu the operator, and Shiva the destroyer. So the destruction or the fall is not bad. It is just necessary for rejuvenating and growth. So let me then quickly give you one more example. See how one can say when COVID-19 happened and Olympics were deferred. Imagine the plight of the sports person who all these months was preparing and was speaking. Now with Olympics being deferred, would you say it's a fall? Perhaps yes. Should I get disheartened? No. Should I rebuild? Yes. And in terms of, should I do it all over again, the branding? Somebody sent this innovative stuff that for all the placards and the hoardings that were made, why just we add NE and see we will save the cost as well. So take the cost benefit decisions, that's fine. But like Navdeep said, when you talk about ethics or communication, unlike cost benefit, they are not binary. So you have to think from heart, brain, everything. I know I had talked about A to Z of effective communication. I had run you through A to F. Very quickly, let me also share the remaining. G, general knowledge. So anyone who wishes to become an effective communicator, you should really have general knowledge. So if somebody talks about whether the vaccine of COVID-19 has come, you cannot say, no, I'm not a scientist, I don't know. You can say hand washing is also a vaccine. Social distancing is also a vaccine. And anybody can be having a scientific temper and contribute to say how we could create a ventilator that could be cheaper and have better access, how you could have gratitude. H, humor. Humor is very essential. Human beings, to be joyful or not is purely in our hands. Health. I think COVID-19 has again put health, more importantly, public health, at the forefront. I am as safe and secure and healthy as my neighbor. I cannot throw all the garbage out of my house and think my house is clean. So long as the community does not come together, we are not going to be safe. Hand gestures. So some hand gestures are fine, but sometimes we do too many hand gestures. Homework is so very essential for an effective communicator. I, innovative, make it interactive. J, joyful. K, show keen interest. L, life experiences. So if you really want to be standing out unique, it's essential that you draw upon from your own life. And there's nothing like life as a teacher. M, mock sessions. No matter how good somebody is, it won't happen unless they've practiced. So you may only see 10 seconds of 100-meter race. You forget that athlete prepared for 4 years to participate in Olympics for that 10 seconds race. Mock sessions. Be natural. Don't try to copy. You will become an effective communicator. Develop your own style. Oh, whenever they give you a chance, don't say I'm not prepared. You will never be prepared 100%. Any opportunity to express, please observe. Please take that. Also sharpen your observation. Now P is very important. P is for pause. Many of us make a mistake by just going on and on and on. No pause. Good. Consciously take a pause because it will help the recipient absorb what you are trying to say. Q, Q&A. If you have a curiosity and if you have the ability to ask questions, that's great. In fact, I have always believed that if there is a student who asks a question, that means he is understanding something in that class. Our research, like you saw today when you talk about communication, how Professor Harvey and University of Exeter has given us research-based evidence to support the behavior, the vulnerability, the solutions. R is also for respect. I have full right in a democracy to express my opinion. You have full right to disagree. Let's respect diversity. R is also reading. They say leaders are readers. So lockdown gives you time. Try to read as much as you can, whatever you can lay your hands on. S, simplify. S, smile. T, tone. U, unique. V, voice modulation. W, very essential. Weather, contingent situations. So like the chairman said, I had the chance to do a lot of commentary covering Prime Minister Modi and the guests who come to India. So the last big commentary I did was when President Trump came to Ahmedabad. It was a massive commentary, 3.5 hours live on Doordarshan. We were supposed to go on air at 11:45. In fact, that morning we had put out the ad on Doordarshan and social media that the live commentary will be from 11:45. Now, as luck would have it, President Trump's Air Force One landed a little early. The producer told us that we are going live at 11:25. Now, should we say as commentator that we're not ready? You have to be prepared for a contingent situation. Say, for example, you were slated to go at number 3 to speak, but somehow the first and second speaker didn't turn up. Would you not speak? So once you've told your mind that contingency can happen, you can weather that. And contingency does happen. That's life. X factor. X factor. There is some X factor. That is also a contributing factor to somebody becoming an effective communicator. Why? You are the PPT. A lot of people feel if they make PPTs and glamorous PPTs, they'll become effective. PPTs can contribute, but you are the PPT. In Z, there has to be a zeal. So, we started by saying, rishte, rishte. I think we are going to end by saying, we hope when it comes to effective communication, you have mauke hi mauke. Over to respected chairman and vice chairman for the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Navdeep. Thank you, Professor Harvey. Definitely it was a great session. I can say session with much clarity, much in-depth, and hope it was of great benefit of all 12,500 participants who have joined. So it is definitely a great session. And the numbers of participants is also good, 12,500, which I can see. So, sir, let me take up the few questions. There are several questions, so we need to be crisp and short in our answers, otherwise we are not able to cover. But first questions, and it is to Amit specifically. A person says that I am from a Hindi medium school, I am from a humble background, having a background of my study in a small place of my schooling, college. Post that I came to Delhi. So is it must that I need to communicate in English, or if with confidence I communicate even in Hindi, does it be effective?
So thank you for the question. The language is not a barrier when it comes to being an effective communicator. Yes, given the fact that English is a universal language, if somebody does master proficiency in English, it does add value. And in a competitive world that we are in, having that additional value does help. But whether you communicate in Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, or for that matter, even if you do not know any of the languages, spare a thought for somebody who's deaf and mute. I'm saying if you know sign language, you can still be an effective communicator. Let's be grateful to God that we can express. And therefore, whether you know a language or not does not make much of a difference.
But, another question, how to keep yourself motivated in a situation where every news around you is about disease, death, destruction, demoralizing, deep silence, downfall? So how to go ahead?
Professor.
Anyone amongst you? Yeah.
I've taken quite a strict rule on myself not to listen to too much news each day, because I agree with your listener that there's only so much bad news that you can hear. So my tactic, it tends to be listen to the BBC in the morning here in the UK to get the headlines and then to move on. So I think that's one aspect, that notwithstanding the importance of reading that was said before, not listening to too much news, I think actually is probably a good thing, because if you think about how news is reported, if you were to code across the world today all the news, you would have a much higher proportion of negative news to positive news. And that would be true if we did the survey last year or if we did it today. So to remind ourselves that actually we do live in wonderful communities, we live in a wonderful environment, we have fantastic people around ourselves. So don't be overly skewed when you listen to the news into thinking that everything is bad. That doesn't mean not to trust what's being said, but there is a lot of wonderful things and compassionate things going on as well. And even better, if you can appreciate those positive things going on around you and to think of ways that you can do things positive to help others in an appropriate way, then that will make you feel self-fulfilled.
So let me come to the third question. A perfect answer by Professor. So the third question is communication tips for success for a startup. Any communication tip for a person who is going for a new startup?
Navdeep, as an investor in almost a dozen tech startups, would you like to start first? Please unmute. I think one tip for the digital world is always unmute before speaking. We are all learning that new normal.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So for a startup, I would give you 3 tips. Number 1, fight the fear of criticism. As a startup entrepreneur, there'll be so many people who will be telling you why your idea is not going to work. And that creates fear for criticism. What I like to do is I'll quote Aristotle. Aristotle had a brilliant quote that I think fits the situation really well. He used to say, avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. So I think the first rule is have the courage to ask questions and face criticism as you communicate with people. Number 2, as a startup entrepreneur, be very crisp and clear, top down, about the problem or the pain point you're going to solve and the value you're going to create. Because if you start the discussion by talking about your technology or your idea, but you do not tell people about the problem, the simple problem you're going to solve, you're going to lose people. That's number 2. And number 3, make sure you tell your potential investors how your idea will make them money. Connect the dots to money. Connect the dots to money. So those are the three rules I would follow as a startup entrepreneur.
And a quick tip to add to what Navdeep said. It's good for everyone, but more so for startup entrepreneurs. Be a storyteller. Learn to be a storyteller. What's the pain point and what's the solution you're going to offer? Professor, any tip for you, particularly for startup entrepreneurs?
Terrific tips from both of you. I would just add one, which is, as an entrepreneur in a startup situation, in most cases, you will find that your reputation amongst your new audience, whether that's a customer or an investor, is fairly limited. And so if there is any way that you can borrow reputation, and what I mean by that is maybe you partner with someone to help endorse you, or there may be an alignment with a business that has a really strong and complementary reputation to help you, then that can give you leverage to get a bit of exposure. Because one of the starting points with any business is to gain prominence. And so people are just at least aware that you exist. And in order to be aware of you existing, you might need the support of others to borrow that reputation for a bit. But importantly, if you're going to borrow that reputation, under no circumstances borrow it with an individual or an organization that is eroding the brand that you're trying to build.
Thank you all. So the next question. I'm a chartered accountant and I can assure that I am more knowledgeable, more equipped with the course curriculum than a MBA is. CA across the country are not at par with MBAs of leading B school, whether it is India or abroad, when it comes to industry preference of corporate finance or investment as job are concerned. What is needed for CA or ICAI that we can be one step ahead of MBAs? What do you suggest, whether to revamp in the course content is needed or entrance tests need to be tougher or any other solution so that CAs can be ahead of MBAs?
I'm happy to go first if you like, Navdeep. You've got some extra time to prepare your answer. I would say leadership in a cross-boundary context. So I think one thing that MBA programs tend to do very well is the teaching of leadership. And if I was to be really challenging, I would say that often that teaching of leadership can sometimes be a little narrow in the sense of thinking about leadership only in a business context. For me, leadership is everywhere. We see leadership in politics, we see leadership in schools, we see leadership in communities, we see leadership in the voluntary sector. It is absolutely everywhere. And so I think thinking about how you as an individual, as the head of research within a business school, it doesn't make sense for me just to think about the accountancy side or the finance side or the HR side or the people side or other functions within the business school. I need to be thinking holistically, how as a business school or as a university can we thrive over the next decade or century? And in order to do that, I need to be able to engage and understand what is happening across those different functions. And more, and this comes back to the stakeholder discussion, I need to think much more broadly beyond the boundaries of my business or the organization. And so I suppose my one sentence response to your audience would be that effective cross-boundary leadership and thinking more broadly about leadership is a really important starting point.
Great, sir. Thanks for effectively guiding. One more question. In the government department, even a written communication, even a mail is unheard. Then what is the use of oral effective communication? What type of communication will be effective in the government department? I think it is more towards Amit so that he can speak about how to go ahead and how to communicate with India government system in India.
Yeah, thanks for that question. See, I have worked very closely with both the central and the state governments. Government is learning with each passing day. To give you an example, when COVID happened, we had the press conference happening at the National Media Center in Delhi almost every day. But initially, when we were doing that conference for the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, it was sometimes 6 p.m., 5 p.m. So 2-3 days, it went like this. And the response we got from the audience, why don't you have it at one time? And we corrected ourselves. And from the second week, it was always at 4 p.m. Always 4 p.m. And we got a very good response that every day, the moment clock strikes 4 p.m., you will have a conference going live on Doordarshan, where you will have the representatives of Ministry of Health and, as need be, representative of Niti Aayog, representative of Ministry of Home Affairs, if it was the issue of migrant workers, or whichever ministry. And it went off well. So government is also learning that the traditional ways won't suffice. We are in a digital era. Therefore, whether it's government, public, private, schools, the digital communication is the way forward. And therefore, I urge everyone to understand the digital landscape better. In fact, I would like to congratulate our dear institute ICAI here under the able leadership of our President, C. Atul Gupta. ICAI has come up with what is known as Digital Competency Maturity Model. We had come come up with DCMM version 1 in 2017. It didn't pick much traction then, but as I said, COVID has been a boon in disguise to give a digital push to almost everything. We have now DCMM, Digital Competency Maturity Model version 2. And I encourage all the finance professional chartered accountants to go to ICAI website, click on the icon Digital Learning Hub, download and learn more about DCMM version 2. This is a self-evaluation you can do for your professional firms. Where are you currently digitally and what path you could follow? Rajesh ji, DCMM, congratulations for this accomplishment.
I think ICAI was the first professional body to have a digital accounting board. So it was a digital board. So DAP, it was a great thing done by ICAI. One question, I think it was something related to your previous year. How can communication between 8:30 to 5:30, even by email, be observed in organization having different geographic areas?
Professor, you mentioned that. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great. It's a great question, and that's why I suppose the example I gave, it works in Exeter. We have different campuses, but of course, yes, we're not working across different time zones. But even if you're an operation that cuts across different time zones, then I think there are certain cultures that you can operate within a given geographic office that may be expected. But of course, I understand that in some particular situations where there is a necessity to work across time zones, there may be kind of these hot periods where there's going to be a need for people to work slightly kind of outside of what may be a traditional hour. So I wouldn't want to prescribe what we have said as a one size fits all. But I guess the wider point I was trying to make there is that people are juggling a lot of things at the moment. They're juggling high stressful work environments, juggling family commitments. At one point, my son came in to show me a sword just a moment ago. And, on the one hand, I'm sort of wanting to engage with him. But on the other hand, I'm involved with an important activity here. And so I think just being mindful of where your employees and other stakeholders are, and just trying to adapt your expectations around them and understanding the kind of needs of the business as well. If you can do those things in tandem, then I think you create goodwill and a better culture than if you neglect those.
Yes, just wanted to add to Professor's answer that given the digital world we are in now, the line between personal and professional work has got blurred, and it requires a critical balance to do best of both worlds. And this is where any compassionate gesture by the employer will come very handy, one for their own reputation, two for their employees, because you have to respect and value human resources. But coming back to the difference that one questioner had asked between MBA and CA, Navdeep Arora, I would like you to add to what Professor had said. You are an MBA from Harvard. With pun intended, do you regret not doing chartered accountancy? Please unmute. Kindly unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So to answer your question, just being plain honest, had I tried to do chartered accountancy, I would have never made it. I would have never passed. I honestly, I know how difficult, getting through chartered accountancy is, how difficult the exams are, your internships, your apprenticeship. I think, in my opinion, getting a chartered accountancy is much, much, much harder than getting an MBA degree. So hats off to all of you. And then to answer your other question, how if you juxtapose an MBA graduate next to a CA? How do you compare the two? I think the point Professor Harvey made was, in my opinion, covered 80% of the essence, which is, I think, if given your strong intrinsics as a chartered accountant, if you can combine that with strategy and leadership, if you can, so as a CA, you're obviously into a lot of details, into the financial performance and the operating performance of the company. I think if you can learn how to step out of that and take a 20,000 view of the strategy of the organization, of the leadership, working with people, understanding the culture of the organization. Like they say, culture eats strategy for lunch, right? So I think those would be, if a chartered accountant can add strategy, leadership, and culture to their toolkit, I think they can be much, much, much stronger than MBAs. That's my view. And I have had the opportunity to work with many chartered accountants who, in my opinion, they actually understood the intrinsics of the business much, much better than MBAs. And once they picked up the strategic view, the leadership view, which I would say is the most important, as Professor Harvey highlighted, I think they were much more successful in the long run.
Thank you, Mr. Navdeep, for all kind words, because we all have done started accountancy with a lot of hard work, covering the widest of the curriculum in accounts, tax, finance and audit, and clearing the toughest of the exams, what I can say. So let me come to another question. How to handle a hostile situation in job, in business, in politics, in society, and overall in the world at large?
I'm happy to take a first go at that. All leaders and managers need to confront. And what I mean by that is not, when I use the term confront, I don't mean in a physical sense. I mean that it is a very healthy thing throughout our lives to be challenged and to have our worldview and perspective rocked a little, because it pushes us intellectually to explore whether our perspective, whether that's a leadership approach, whether it's a strategy, whether it's a new business, it pushes us to think carefully about our kind of way of doing things. And so what I would say to the person who asked the question is that the starting point should always be that even though we don't like to be challenged, and that comes from an early stage of being a child, right, where you're often told by your parent no, to all the way through to the rest of our lives, it is actually, again, coming back to this circular view of life, it's an important part of our learning process. But that said, once we acknowledge that it's actually a really important part of challenging who we are and what we do, I think it's your disposition and how you respond to the way in which people challenge you that is very important. So this comes down to personality, of course, but I think humility and recognizing that you've heard what someone has said is a really important form of communication, and that was something that I wanted to. And when we think about communication, we're always thinking about what we say, but actually a really important part of communication is listening. And so there's a very important coaching tool known as active listening, which is where when someone is confronting you, you may active listen back to them. And that means that you would kind of try and capture the essence of what someone has said to you in your own words. And that does two things. One, it really shows that you've heard what they've said. And two, it gives them the opportunity to clarify on any additional points. And so I guess those would be sort of my two major points. That one, confronting it is an important part of any form of dialogue and learning. And two, that listening can play a really important tool in terms of hearing what someone said and also to reduce some of that emotion from that person that is coming to you.
So I just wanted to add to what Professor said, that the question perhaps we need to ask ourselves is, do you want to experience life or avoid life? If you want to avoid life, do whatever you want to. If you want to experience life, today most if not all gave a testimony that this is a cyclical approach. And therefore, CA could well be seen as challenge accepted. And that's the great fun, because as we showed in that slide, growth is life and growth will happen at the edge of one's ability.
Another question. Any suggestion for someone who have a lot to say but is an introvert by nature, hence gets overlooked by professional group setting?
Navdeep, are you an introvert, extrovert?
I think can you all hear me? Okay. I think that's here's my opinion. I'll go back to something I said earlier. I think whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, find the courage to speak up. Find the courage to speak up. And I can tell you, it is difficult in the beginning. It is difficult in the beginning. And the reason it's difficult is because we think everybody else knows more than us, right? And the reality is all of us have perspectives that are valuable. I think we always underestimate how much we have to offer, how much others can learn from us. So do not underestimate your insights, your capabilities, and what you can contribute to the world, number one. Number two, do not be afraid of criticism. This goes back to Aristotle. Avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. So that would be my suggestion. Even if you're introverted, find the courage to say what you think and ask questions. Here's another thing, right? I think we all feel that when we speak, we have to give answers. When the reality is some of the best problem solvers, some of the best communicators are the people who actually had none of the answers, but asked the most provoking questions. That's it. Will, you were going to say something? Sorry.
Thank you. Excellent points, Navdeep. I would say two very brief things. One, Amit mentioned before about the importance of technology. Remember that you can also raise important issues through other digital mediums. So communication through voice is just one medium. So if even in the short term you struggle to verbally articulate a question in a room or in a face-to-face environment, think about how you can convey that message through other digital mediums. That would be my first point. My second point is I think your question is not just geared at the person speaking, but is also geared towards the group or the person that's facilitating that environment. So I'm a chair of a board, for instance, and so there are 11 board members who I represent and chair for meetings, part of my job as a chair is to ensure that I am capturing the sentiment of the room. Now that works two ways, right? So individuals on the board have a responsibility to share their insights and their expertise, and they can do that through different mediums, as I just said. But part of my job as the leader of that board is also to actively solicit and to understand where different members of that board come from. And so I do think that there is an onus on the individual to voice, but whoever is facilitating the meeting or that discussion environment also has a responsibility to ensure that they're capturing the general sentiment of the room and not privileging the voices of a few.
As we have around 13,000 persons who are attending, so now the list of questions is coming in hundreds, so definitely we cannot cover them. We are all aware of that. But final question, let me take, as it is specifically put to Amit. So I'm taking this last question. After that, I'd be requesting the architect of this whole 3-day program, our co-chairman Hansraj Chibji, to take over for final vote of thanks. So the last question, where would you put investing in yourself in the 3-step cyclic process? If you say at each phase consistently, then how would you measure professional success as a comparative among group of professionals who all go through such a journey? Let me take a most common example. First attempt chartered accountant in comparison vis-a-vis to chartered accountant who do not clear in first attempt. Amit.
Thank you for the question. Frankly speaking, I never distinguish between somebody who cracks chartered accountancy in first attempt or in multiple attempts. And usually I give this analogy that when Virender Sehwag came on the cricketing scene, a lot of people said he copies Sachin Tendulkar. I used to tell those people, you copy Sachin Tendulkar. Let Brett Lee bowl at you. Let Dale Steyn bowl at you at 150 km per hour. You copy Sachin. And therefore, whether one attempt or multiple, to crack a course like chartered accountancy needs certain amount of hard work. Or for that matter, any course. So, I would in fact say some interviewers may give preference to those who may have taken multiple attempts because they would have experienced failure or the so-called failure much earlier in life. And even in startup they say, if you want to fail, fail fast. So there is pros and cons to everything. You will only feel inferior if you allow it to be seen that way. It is a matter of perception. The moment you will have enhanced perception of life, 1 attempt, 3 attempt, all of this will have no meaning. I would just like to conclude by saying, we are all sailors in life. It is not that we are permanently stationed at the rise or the fall or the rebuild. It is a constant churning of life that is happening. And therefore, let me conclude, even as I express gratitude once again to both my guests, Professor Will Harvey, Navdeep Arora, to the entire team ICAI. My final remarks is that we're all sailors. And the quote says, a smooth sea never made a skillful sailor. The sea could be rough. It's the skill in you that will ensure that you are a sailor who rides smoothly with a smile. Thank you very much.
Good. I will also conclude with thanks and gratitude to Navdeep and Professor as well as you. And before handing over to Hansraj ji, I will also tell a couplet in Hindi. हम तो दरिया हैं, हमें अपना हुनर मालूम है. जिस तरफ चल पड़ेंगे रास्ता बन जाएगा. जिस तरफ चल पड़ेंगे रास्ता बन जाएगा. पर चलना पड़ेगा. एक्शंस लेने पड़ेंगे उसके लिए. मेहनत करनी पड़ेगी. बैठ करके कुछ नहीं होता. So that is a thing. And after all, as I told, the architect of this 3-day program, my co-chairman Hansraj Chibji, who had planned this program in best of the way and a well-attended program in all the 3 days. So I congratulate him for such a marvelous and well-planned program. over to Hansraj Chudji for concluding remark and final vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for such a encouraging words for me. Though definitely you can understand with it is the leaders who has to play the role, and you have shouldered the responsibility and you have shared the responsibility with me. That is a thanks to you rather than giving a thanks to me. It's a otherwise around. It goes otherwise unless until the chairman has a confidence on the vice or the co-chairman, the subordinate to him, how he will shoulder, because it's the whether it goes the success or it goes the failure. So always it is the risk is of the chairman. If the things would have not gone well, so who will be the major affected person? It would have been the chairman. So now also the credit always goes to the chairman only. I am really very grateful and thankful to the confidence he has shared with me, and basically the coming from the heart, basically so good the session is. Definitely I appreciate from my heart the vote of thanks. Rather, it is a word which we normally talk about, is a formal word, but coming from the heart, all the three speakers, though coordinator is for me, it is the one only Amit Arora ji who has plays a very best of the role, not in the dual capacity, one as a speaker, second coordinating with the other two speakers. That is basically the dual role. He has shared my responsibility. Whatsoever is chairman has given me the responsibility, it is not me only. It has been co-shared by so many others also, like the today's program, sharing the responsibility, sharing the shoulder with the Amit Arora ji. I am really very grateful and thankful to him for bringing out so many things A to Z for the communication and the methodology by which every aspects, whether it is A or whether it is B or whether it is Z, has to be taken care of. That has been greatly been given to all the participants, and thanks to the Professor Will Harvey ji, he has really been put so many good things for the members, for the profession, for the professional around us, maybe 13,000 plus. The global issues also covering so many aspects which really one has to learn upon, one has to be guided with, one has to be mentoring with. So many good things which has come from the heart of you. Really, I inspire and I really appreciate the way you have put to our members fraternity. I am really very grateful and thankful to each one of you on behalf of the ICAI, on behalf of the committee for member industry and business, on behalf of the chairman also, on my personal behalf also, and on behalf of the each and every participants also. The best thanks goes to Navdeep Arora ji, definitely who has spoken very high about the profession. Definitely he has been great enough to strategize and brought so many things about the ethics also, so many good things about the values also, and the communication, the methodology with which one has to be forcefully, has to draw into the fight has to be there. It is no fear. Fear has to be kept away. Definitely the strength has to be matched with. Then only growth can happen with. But it's a journey. It's a journey. It is not always rise. It has to really be a cycle. Cycle has to keep on moving, which everyone has really been taken care of. I really appreciate the presence of each and everyone. Thanks to each and everyone on behalf of the all the participants also, on behalf of our own behalf also. And I'm grateful, thanks to the participants, those who have been responded with such a large number for this program, which has been drawn into with the support of our chairman and the other team members. I'm very grateful and thankful to all the participants. Thanks to the organizing team at the secretariat level also, and whosoever has coordinated with the technical side also. I'm really grateful and thankful to them also. Thank you all. Thank you, wish these kind of programs will be with great support for each one of you, will be there in the time to come also, for the future also. Thank you.
Thanks to all for sparing time for ICAI and delivering to all our young chartered accountants and around 13,500 persons who have attended today's program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.